Thank you for joining us. My name is Joe Goldberg. I'm the Cloud Practice Manager here at CCSI. I want to welcome you to our Cybersecurity 102 presentation. Today, Matt Pascucci, our Security Practice Manager, will be talking about understanding and implementing the NIST CSF and ISO 27001 frameworks. Here at CCSI, actually, Matt, if you could skip 2 slides. Here at CCSI, we have been in business for 40 years. We provide infrastructure and data center services like networking, routing, switching, hyperconverged, and storage. We also do third-party maintenance with priority on-site response, break fix, and a SmartNet replacement. We do all sorts of cloud, which is my specialty. We do containers, Kubernetes, microservices. We are cloud agnostic, DRaaS and BaaS, and SD-WAN. And we have a full cybersecurity practice. You'll be hearing from Matt today about that, with ransomware and DDoS assessment, security and vulnerability and threat protection. And we have a 24/7 SOC 2 Type 2 compliant NOC and SOC, where we do all sorts of managed services, log management, SIM, and we can provide all sorts of custom SLAs. So now I will turn it over to Matt Pascucci, who will give you the goods on understanding and implementing the NIST CSF and ISO 27001.
All right, guys. Thank you, Joe. So we're going to get started here. I would say 2 weeks ago, we did one that was with NIST and the CIS controls. So when we did that one, we kind of went over the differences between controls and programs and frameworks and what they all mean. And we kind of did that one with NIST and how that intertwines into NIST and how CIS works with that. We're going to do the same thing today a little bit with how that works with NIST and with ISO. So let's get started here. First of all, let's just quickly go over for all those who weren't here last time. The first couple slides are going to be a little bit of a recap. So a control versus a framework. So the controls, really, these are the building blocks of success for your program. There's a very subtle difference between them, but it's very important to understand them. So controls are very deep with the technical ability. You're digging down into there, you're getting the understanding, it's very granular. Those controls could be everywhere. So as an example, we have NIST 853 on here. We have the CIS controls that we spoke about last time, how those are actually implemented with the top 20. That's the controls. The controls really give you that foundational and overarching aspect of what should I actually be doing technically, like where should I be focusing? And you compare that a little bit with the framework, which is more strategic and simplifying your communication. So you're adding that structure in place. So when we see that we have ISO has a little bit of both, right? As well as NIST, 853 of the controls, but they have their own program, which is the CSF, and then you have the CIS controls, which are now doing implementation groups as part of their controls, so they can help you build your program. So we're seeing a lot of these controls actually become programs, and some of the programs now relying on some of the controls. So they're kind of just becoming actually peel off, and they say, hey, for this control, look at this particular regulation, or for this program, go look at NIST, and they're building off each other. But end of the day, a control is a very granular technical way of describing what has to be done, and a program framework is really just building that structure, getting an understanding of what they are, evaluating which controls to use, and then customizing and measuring where you can go from there. So subtle difference, but actually very important to understand. So as we move forward with that, we see the progression of maturity. So we said, start off with the controls, go pick one, get the CIS controls, get them in there, start moving. If you have nothing else to do, that's a great way of focusing on there. I really, really love the CIS controls. They've done a fantastic job on what they've implemented over the past couple of years. But you get those controls, the granular technical area of where you're going to focus, and then you build on top of that with a program framework, and you pick one, whether it's going to be ISO, is it going to be NIST, are you going to take a combination of a few of them, which we'll see, and you build that out. Where are you going to go? What is going to guide you? Because you might have controls that are within the framework that you were looking at, and you have nothing to do with them. So they're just, without the program framework, the controls are really just controls, right? So the program framework guides that, and we'll get into that as well. Now, a little bit outside of what we're talking about now is more risk frameworks. So, NIST has one. They have their 839 because NIST has everything. ISO has the ISO 27005. So they have their own risk version of what a framework looks like. So you're taking it now and you're saying, what is my appetite for risk based off of the controls I put in, how I'm managing those controls with the program framework. Now, depending on what's occurring, you're not taking this risk framework and you're saying, based off of that issue, we're going to allow that, or based off of this incident, we're going to accept that or mitigate that or whatever. So that's where you start getting more in depth into aligning the business with your frameworks from a risk standpoint. So interesting. Every business is unique. So you're never going to have a cookie cutter version of one business and their maturity and their frameworks towards another. You might have them use particular frameworks, but they're never going to look the same. Everyone is unique. Everyone has a different risk appetite. Everyone's using a different control framework, whatever. So take this, develop it. It helps you with your roadmap, allows you to measure your maturity over time, which is great. And this is kind of what we want to do kind of going forward. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go over the frameworks of CIS and of ISO and the CSF, so we can get an understanding of how those might affect you. So that's what we're saying. Find a framework that fits your organization. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to do it. If you're sitting there and every company has its own mission, own objectives, tolerance, like we just said. But those frameworks need to be fitting what you're doing. So your industry, maybe you are taking credit cards. So part of your framework, you might have to massage into some of the PCI controls in the control section. You have to understand where your business is going. So how are you going to align that with your business? And taking those frameworks, adopting them, understanding your industry. One of the first things that we always recommend, and a lot of these policies and come out there, is they ask for a risk assessment or a gap analysis. So what you need to do is understand where you kind of are at risk, and from the frameworks that you're looking to use from a program or from a control perspective, where are the gaps in there, fulfill those gaps, plug them in, and then kind of go forward. So that's a big initial step to do anything here, is really try to understand the frameworks that you think would fit your industry, where you're going to be going in the future, so that your business is aligned with it. Because if your business is not aligned with your frameworks, it's just not going to work, right? So, and that's just anything. So understand the culture, get things kind of moving in there, and then apply the framework, which is the lens of how you are going to envision security going forward. All the frameworks are just a way of continually monitoring, managing, and identifying risk and security threats within your organization. So not all controls will fit in there. So you might have things, we mentioned last time, you might not use wireless. So the controls for wireless might not be applicable to you. Doesn't mean you don't put it in your framework. It just means that they're not there yet. And you can actually write there that there is nothing implemented with these controls because we don't have anything right now that's using Wi-Fi. That's just a random example. But the combination of these standards and the combination of your industry frameworks, whether it be HIPAA, maybe PCI, NYDFS, you can take those and build your own into it. So as an example, NYDFS heavily uses NIST CSF in the 853 for their controls. So if you're going to say that is going to be my going forward program framework, that's what you got to adhere to. Those controls are heavily based off of NIST. So these things are intertwined with each other. And we want to make sure that everything is just working, that you understand you have a roadmap and a way towards a goal that's continuous. And just going out there and just understanding that there are controls that you might not use. There's parts of your program framework that you're going to massage and make your own. And it's going to be, at the end of the day, your business or your organization's maturity on how you're going to move forward. Now, that being said, one of the big ones that we see all the time is the ISO. So this is the International Organization of Standards. Everyone has seen this. They do more than just security. They're just making standards for so many areas of regulatory business on how to go about and make some type of specification for an industry, and then using that to either be certified or accredited, which we'll go over in a second, to use that to show either clients or to show other businesses that you kind of have your stuff together, right? You're following a standard, you're not winging it. And that's a big thing that we see with the ISO. And with security in mind, it's essentially they're calling it the ISMS, so International Standards. That's their information security management system, the ISMS. You'll see that all over their documentation. That's really what it stands for. That's really your program, right? What are you building? How are you building it? Everything that they do here, it assists with making things continuous, making things repeatable. That is the big part of ISO. That's a big part of all the frameworks that we see, is how is this done continuous? It's not a snapshot in time. It's kind of moving. So today we're going to go over the ISO 27001 and focusing on 2013. They have some interesting controls in there. With that too, as we said, the program of ISO 27001 is built to two sections, and those sections are split up between framework and control objectives, and we're going to kind of go through that today a little more detail. But the interesting part about the ISO is that you can have it independently accredited. So you can use it, you can download everything for free, and you say, hey, we follow the ISO standards. If anyone was coming up to you, this is how we're going to do things. But then you can also go out there and say, not only are we following them, but we're having them audited, and we're being certified in it by a third party. So you can actually get that, send that to clients, show that to auditors, do what you have to do to prove that, yes, we are following what we are saying here from the ISO. They're the ones who are making the standards. We're taking it, we're making it our own. We're being audited by an accredited third party, and we are now being certified in that to show that we are doing this on a continual basis, and that's how things kind of move forward. There's other things like SOC 2 Type 2. Those are very similar ways of doing things. Those are more on a service provider aspect. ISO could be for any business of any size, and the same programs and control objectives still apply. From the confusing part, a lot of times people will go out there and use the word accreditation and certification, and they're using them in a way that might not be appropriate, just so that when you read through documentation, accreditation is the certified body. So if you had somebody, as an example, come in and audit you, in order for them to be audited, they need to be accredited. So when you get audited by a quote unquote accredited certification body, you get certified. So, companies get certified, auditing companies get accredited, and that's kind of the way it's through. So you might see that through some of the documentation, just a quick one that confuses people sometimes when they're looking at that. So that's really the high level. So if you're an organization and you're looking to go make sure that your controls and your frameworks are appropriate, you're going to be getting a certification from an accredited body, and hopefully that makes some sense. But it is a very confusing standpoint as you go through some of those documents. So with the newer versions of ISO, they don't always do the PDCA cycle as much anymore, but I'm going to bring it up anyway because it's very important. I still like it, and it still can be useful today. So when you're building out your ISMS, your Information Security Management Program, you're building it out to follow the controls, to follow the frameworks that you have in place. And what that does is it really just, and have it here, it systematically examines risk. That's the first thing. So anything that's coming in through your organization, that's really the view of what is going on inside my place here, my organization, my place of business. The next thing they like to come after and develop for is the implementation and designing it. So understanding where you're at risk, like I said before, risk assessments, those are great. Then getting the design, so determining where you're at risk, where the security holes could be, designing that, and then implementing those controls into areas where you might have unacceptable risks. So you've identified those risks, and now you're putting something in place to stop them, or to at least notify you if they're occurring. And then the last phase that they normally would want to do is the continuous management. So making sure that you're constantly identifying where your risk is, and then making sure that you're going out there and implementing those control-based solutions that you put in. So there's this phase and it's this cycle, and that's what they're kind of following now. In the past, in the older versions, they did something called the PDCA, which is the Plan, Do, Check, Act, which comes out to plan means you're establishing your program, You're putting your process and your procedures, your risk management, anything that is going to be like global policies across the organization. So you're preparing and you're getting ready to go. That's also commonly called the establish phase. The next one is the do phase. So you're actually implementing, you're doing what you said you were going to do from a controls and process procedure standpoint, right? And then you have the check phase, which we kind of just talked about before. This is the monitor. This is the continuous management, which I said before, where you're constantly going out there, you're measuring your performance, you're doing metrics, you're getting things in a place where you can monitor exactly what's occurring within your organization that doesn't meet the standards of your design, or something has gone awry. So there's an incident or a breach, and now you're checking and you're validating all these controls you have in place. And then from that standpoint, they have the act phase. So the act phase pretty much says once something happens that's outside of what is established, you're going to go out and do corrective and preventative actions, right? You're going to do this on the basis of the results of what you actually put in from the ISMS initially, so the management part of it. So that's historically, they've done a lot with the PDCA. They don't mention that as much anymore. They kind of go back with those 3 bullets in the middle here, where it's like examining, designing, and continuous. They kind of combine the check and act one in the last one, where you don't really have as 4 phases anymore. You have more of 3. So is what it is. That's kind of if you see any older documentation, PDCA, that's what it means, and that's how they've historically gone over things. Here's some controls based off of the 2701 2013 controls. So this is what I wanted to break out a little bit here for you. So we have this section here. Previously, in the older version, there was 102 controls in the management side. We're showing 148 here. So what happened was, when this one was updated, they took a lot of the controls in the operational. So consider the operational section here in the bottom. That is the control objectives. Consider the ones here on management in the peach color. That one is more of the program framework. Okay. So when you get audited and you're going through the audit, all the audit really focuses heavily on is the management side of things, how you're doing things in there. So what they did is they took a lot of the operational controls, so the actual controls, that they call them also discretionary controls. You'll see in the bottom here in the annex, discretionary controls. Some of those controls went up higher into the management, which means now you can be heavily audited on them. So what you're seeing here is this is the way that they're using. So you're having that initial management program, and within those programs, they will push down and rely on the discretionary controls, which is more operational. So they're using the words management and operational. Management meaning this is how things are managed. This is our program that we're managing with. And operational is how we're using these controls operationally to fulfill what we're saying we're doing from a management perspective. And that's where we get really into all these smaller sub controls and how we actually deal with the networking and continuous management of certain areas, how you're using access control, and a lot of new ones coming in based off of the supply chain, which is really big right now. So that's where we start getting into all of these smaller controls, where you see like A5 through A18, which there are 14 controls there. But that's the way that they are splitting it right now from a management standpoint, or a program, and an operational or a control. This is also adding more auditable areas within the framework by pushing some of those controls a little bit higher, bubbling them up to the top, right? So these controls are also internationally accepted through the frameworks, and they're just really just the ones that are going out there right now and guiding your program and your process. You don't have to do all the discretionary controls. You can say, these are the ones I'm being audited on. Understanding your scope is huge, but if you don't do all the management ones, they're considered non-conformity, and it's a reason for you not to be certified or accredited, either one, if you're a service provider or a company. So as they're saying, is they are really heavily, they're focusing on the governance and the risk management of the management controls, a lot heavier here from the program side of things if you're going through a certification process. But you can always use the controls below here. These controls, you can download them on the ISO.org. They're all there. It's tons of pages you can just dig into. We're giving you here right now a breakdown of control versus framework, so we can kind of help you kind of guide you as you go through that. But they're all within, they call it Annex A, or these are discretionary. So discretionary meaning you don't have to do all of them, but if you're saying that you're in scope and you're getting audited, management has to get done, you tell them which one of the discretionary or operational ones within the controls are being done, and you'll be certified on just that. And that will be your scope. Your scope will be, hey, I'm doing all the management, but I'm going to be, I'm going to have scope of, A5 through A10. Those are the ones, certify me on those. And that's what your certification will show. So you can never go out and say that you have, A11 through 18 done because you weren't accredited. I'm sorry, you weren't certified in them. So that's how things work here. And that's how we've been working along with it. So the certification stage is really quickly, a couple of different stages. The first stage is you're pretty much very informal with the auditors. They're coming in. I wouldn't be that informal with them. Don't tell them everything. But the stage is there to familiarize yourself with the process, the people, all the technology that's going to be used, the auditors themselves, and vice versa, right? So this is the getting to know each other phase. And then once that is kind of done, the understanding of the scope is kind of realized. Then it's really the hard work of, okay, time to get compliant. Let's go now. And then you're going to have the ISM tested, independently tested by an accredited body, which we talked about before. These are people who are going to come in and they're going to work with you to certify your program for you. And that's essentially an audit. But passing this stage says, yes, you are good. You can go put that little emblem wherever you want. You can let everyone know that you are now certified from that perspective. But the third and final stage, which we've talked about as well, is continuous monitoring and reassessment of your program. So this is going to continually happen. During phase 2 is you determine when you're going to be doing this. Normally it's annually, but there might be certain areas that you're going to be doing on a certain schedule that's less than annual, so more frequent. That's all decided on you, how that kind of works out. That is usually driven by some type of regulatory body that's saying, go get that, or some type of client that says, you got to test this more frequently because it's a very big concern for us. That's normally how that stuff kind of bubbles its way up. But yeah, that's how you get certified on this framework so that you can go out and show everybody that yes, we are independently certified. We've built the program, we've built controls. People have come out here that have been accredited and they said, yes, we're doing it. And you can let your clients or whoever else you're working with know that that has occurred, and that many times this is done because it's going to stop your clients from auditing you, right? You've already had a third party done. Here it is, send it over to them, show them that it's been done. A lot of times that kind of cools a lot of the requests coming in because they've seen that it's been a third party assessed, and it kind of helps build your reputation and your brand. So that really quick, that was ISO. We're going to go a little more into NIST. We did this last time, but it's very important that we do it again because all of these things are built on NIST. It's a framework. Everyone's kind of somewhat built on top of that. So, NIST is, the CSF is heavily focused on 853 from a control standpoint. So what we're doing here is we're kind of going over their program framework first. Let's go over the program framework. This was developed by the government a few years ago on how companies and organizations should go out and really start doing cybersecurity. Really understand where you're going to look at, what are you going to do, start here. So the NIST CSF framework was built. The cybersecurity framework, it's been out there. It's in 5 stages. Very quickly, this was voluntarily created. So this guidance is there to for your existing controls to better manage what you're doing currently. All the guidelines, the practices, everything that you're doing right now to reduce risk. This is really there to say, here, let's put something wrapped around what you're doing because, this has been tried and true. We've went out there, we've built it. Let's make sure that that you can maybe apply a certain area, show that you're weak or strong in one particular area, and then continue it. So they have this in a circle. This is kind of ripped directly off of this site. So we have here, we're giving them that bottom here, the content was from them. It's fantastic. We couldn't have made it better. So it all starts with these 5 from a program standpoint. As we said, program will guide your controls. Everything here in the circle is cyclical. It's constantly going to be happening. But to start off with, you need to start with identify. Identify is the first phase here. Then you go to protect, detect, respond, recover. So, and then it doesn't stop, and it just keeps on going over and over and over. And one of these phases might be in more of a continual loop. Hopefully the respond isn't and the recover isn't. That one hopefully we use less. But the identify, the detect, and the protect, those ones are that's what's going on today, right? So identify is understanding, essentially what you got. What do you have? What is there in your organization that you need to protect? Figure that out, discover those things, get them down, get those assets, those data, those systems, get them rolling, right? Understand that. Bring you to the next phase, protect. Protecting now after protecting what you've identified in the previous stage. So, okay, I went out there, I found all these systems, I found all this critical data. How am I now going to go and protect it? So figure out the risk review you've done, the gap analysis, go out, protect that stuff, get it done, continually do it. Then you get back down towards detect. So as you're going through and you're protecting, you also want to detect if there is any monitoring of active incidents occurring on that data. So you might put things in place as a firewall, and it's constantly now you've identified you have to go out and protect, critical web applications, and the firewall is lighting up. So you're protecting against it. So you have to detect, hey, we have an active issue going on. You're now going towards the respond phase. When your breach happens, what do you do, right? So that's a big one as well. So when you have the respond there, you're following through the process that we have in place here, and then afterwards you recover. So getting back to par after a breach or after an incident has actually occurred. So I'm taking a sip of water because I'm talking too much, but circular. So that's what happens, and it just continually goes through the course, and that is the NIST CSF in a nutshell. Part of this primary components of CSF is they call out three particular areas. One is the core, profiles, and implementation tiers. And you can kind of see how they kind of fit into the functions. The other ones we call functions, the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Those are functions. Now we'll get into the components. So the core, those are the functions we just talked about. The desired security outcomes. Organizations are in a hierarchy and they're aligned towards the guidance of the controls that you're using. So you have those five. You have identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Those are the core of the NIST CSF. The categories below that, so under identify, you have asset management, business environment, governance, risk assessments, risk management strategy. These are categories. So there's 21 of those categories. Underneath those categories, you have subcategories, which kind of just focus on what controls you should be using. That's the core, right? They then have profiles. So profiles, based off of the 108 different controls that are out there, which ones actually matter to you? Remember we said, make this custom, make this go out there, it doesn't have to look like your competitors or where you were before, and you're coming, make this your own. Align this to your business, develop a profile on your organization. So doing a current profile of what you have in place, doing your gap analysis, that's really going to help you kind of use the desired outcomes of the framework to understand and align your business towards it, right? So essentially what you're doing here is I'm using the core, all those functions we spoke about, all those subcategories, all the little controls. How am I going to make them my own? That's what using the profile is, understanding who, what you are. Implementation tiers is the last one that they kind of call out. And this is interesting because they have 4 of them. So implementation tiers is a qualitative measure of organizational cyber risk management practices. Okay. This is literally ripped off their site, right? So what that really means is based off of where you are, which implementation tier are you? And there's 4 of them. There's one called partial, risk-informed, repeatable, and adaptive. So they want you to, before you apply all the profiles and before you start doing the controls, they kind of have a bottom-up approach. So implementation tiers determine where you are as a business, then define that business in profiles, and actually use the controls. So to get back to the implementation tiers, a partial one, so as the 4 partial, risk-informed, repeatable, adaptive, partial is you really have nothing in place. You deal with stuff as it comes. So you're just sitting there, you're very reactive, and you're waiting for something bad to happen. If something bad happens, you kind of just light your hair on fire and you run around and do what you got to do. Risk-informed, that's the next one. You're paying attention, but you really have no policy in place. You're kind of understand there's an issue, but if it happens, you're reactive, but you understand that there's a problem, right? So you understand, okay, I'm informed, I know phishing is bad, but if it comes in, I'm just gonna delete email or do whatever, right? Doesn't make any sense. You have an understanding, you might not have the expertise to go out and do it. The next one, the third out of the 4, repeatable, is you have policies in place, you have procedures in place, but maybe your tools aren't as attuned as where they should be. Maybe you have something there. You use phishing as an example. Maybe you have, spam filters and phishing and malicious filters in there that to filter out malicious traffic. So you have it, but you just kind of wing it when it comes in. So it's kind of repeatable. You know what you're looking for, but it might not be written in a policy somewhere, right? And then you have the adaptive tier. So, enough controls to deal with all the attacks, right? You have all the controls, and you have real time. You're looking at things. You're able to isolate an attack, able to recover quickly. So the adaptable one is you're essentially doing all functions, all 5 in a row, and you're doing them and you're understanding it. So if you can understand which tier you've come from, where you fit in there, that helps you apply the profile, which helps you say, okay, here's what I have to do. So, it's really a bottom approach from this particular slide on where to develop your program from the CSF, and then how to apply the core, which is the controls. Right here we have these programs here. So this is kind of what we just talked about. We have the categories. They're broken down into 21 as I said before. You have the functions. So the overlying NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the big orange block. Then you have the 5 below that: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Those are the functions. And then below that you have the categories. We're going to get into the subcategories in the next slide. But each one of these you can go through and you'd be like, you know what? Asset management, from identify, that's an area I have a big problem with that. And you'll see from the sys controls too, their number 1 control is go figure out what hardware you have. So it's very similar with the program side of things when you're working with NIST CSF as well. Go figure out from your program, what do you have? How would you deal with that? And then to take it down a notch. So, based off of the gap analysis, this is going to help you say, okay, we went over a gap analysis, determine that we are really bad at asset management. We don't know where our things are. If we don't know where our things are, how are we to protect what we don't know about? So, okay, that's great. You build that profile on yourself. You accept that. You go back down. You say, my implementation tier is I am probably more of a reactive one. I don't know what I don't know, so I have to do analysis and get a better understanding of those things, right? So what we're doing here is we're going to take these, we're going to find the gaps because we're applying this lens to it, and we found out, building out that implementation tier, that we have a gap in our asset management. So we're going to go through our asset management now, right? And then we're going to do this for all these functions, and we're going to determine where our weaknesses are and where our strengths are, and we're going to rate them. We're going to understand how we're going to start directing this there. There might be parts of this here that you don't need. This is just, with a subcategory section. So you just put in there, always put in there that, not that you're not doing it, but at this time, it's not required, right? It's not required. You don't want to just leave controls out there. You want to at least acknowledge them, that they're at this time not required. Because if you already get audited or have someone else come in and assist, they can look at that and you can say, yes, we've reviewed it. It's not required towards our business, or we don't have the need to do that right now. We've accepted the risk, whatever it might be. Just don't leave them empty. So we have the functions, we have the categories, as you can see, and then we're going to break these categories open into subcategories. So these subcategories that we have, these are the areas that we want to focus in, right? So you look at the identify. We just talked about asset management, right? And they had business environment, governance, risk assessment, risk management strategy, supply chain. Those are the categories that we just spoke about in the last slide. Now, underneath it, we're going to go say, I think we said asset management before, right? ID.am, that is the area, because everything is, ID for identify, and then you have PR for protect, DE for detect, and then asset management AM. It's a very, very interesting way of doing things, but yeah, so ID.am, you take that particular category and you say, I'm going to break, that open, or I'm going to break the business environment when open, and then boom, here it is. Here's the sections now of the subcategories on where you should be focusing. So you can look at it here. You're going to break down the business environment, ID.be, ID.be-1, all the way through 5. So these are the subcategories, and you can see how this is now kind of like flowering and unopening for you. And you're getting that look at exactly, based off of all those things you've done on the implementation tier and the profiling, and understanding that kind of area, you've been now focused now. This is guiding you towards focus of, these are areas I need to be concerned with. And they'll bring up these subcategories, right? So the organization's role in the supply chain is identified and communicated. So are you doing anything right now from a risk management standpoint for your supply chain? Is this actually occurring? If you have a weakness there, they now have the informative references that you can use based off of certain other controls, right? So the informative references here, those are all controls. These are areas of control everywhere in here. And what you'll see is you'll see COBIT, and then you'll see the NIST 850 massive documentation, and they'll guide you directly towards CP-2 and SA-12 from those particular areas on how to fulfill those controls. It's the technical, granular area of what to actually do. And I left it for last here for the ISO 27001. Remember we said before it was the controls there, and we can get granular from the discretionary controls. These are the discretionary controls. The 8.15 1.1, 8.15 1.2, like those are the ones that are in there. So based off of NIST, you can still use this as a framework, a program framework, and use the ISO controls. It's really just how are you going to get things done? What is best for you? Maybe there's an overlying larger area that your company needs to use the NIST CSF for, but only one business unit needs to be ISO certified. So you're going to kind of focus that towards there. Whatever it might be, all we're trying to say is understand that the controls can be flip-flopped with the programs. It's up to you guys. Make it your own, but just make it something, right? And what we do at CCSI is we take all those controls. We take the NIST 853 and we take the CIS controls, and then we look at the ISO controls and we build services off of them. So we have security assessments and tabletops. This is really getting into the penetration tests and the risk assessments and understanding where you are from a recovery and a detect perspective, right? If we're going to get down there, vulnerability management, patching, managed email, that is all identification from a vulnerability management, and it also touches on the detect part of it. Patch management and managed email, this is more protect as well as managed endpoint. And then we have the security awareness, which is, and firewall as well, is the exact same thing with the protect and detect. But we have the security awareness, which brings us with the tabletops, but also doing continuous management. One thing that we don't show on here is we do disaster recovery as well. So that's a slide that we should add on here from a security perspective. That is more of the recover. We're going to be able to recover your data. We're building out plans, but all of the stuff goes directly into our managed SOC. So we have a SOC 24/7. Our security operations center is SOC 2 Type 2 certified. So as we're saying here, go get ISO certified. We get SOC certified because we are a service provider, and that is more directed towards that particular certification. So we have that because we have to do what we're telling you guys to do. Go out there, have a third party review your program, your cybersecurity program, your risk program, your privacy program, get it certified, show people that you're good, right? And that's how things kind of work. But from that perspective, that's what we do. So we do these things, we take the programs, we take the controls, and then we make managed services for them 24/7. Everything we do from a service perspective is 24/7, and it's how we apply and assist our clients today with the ability to say, yes, you need help with that, or you've identified a certain area that within the NIST CSF or within your ISO discretionary controls, here's how we fulfill that on a continuous standpoint, because continuous being the key word here. If it's not continuous, it's not going to pass any of these particular certifications. So that's why we went out, years ago, made the investment to get everything in place so that we can do things continuous, and it's really been beneficial to us kind of moving forward. That being said, we are going to have our last framework review, and it's going to be on the MITRE and Lockheed Martin kill chain. So that's going to be interesting too. So we're taking away a little bit more from the frameworks and programs that we're looking at, and we're going to, controls and programs, and we're going to get more towards a framework of just identifying threats using some threat modeling and kind of move forward from there. So a little bit different, not as much regulatory compliance or building programs. This is more going to be in the weeds a bit. So looking very forward to that. That's going to be May 27th, and we'll have something on our site within the next couple of days if anyone would like to register. With that being said, I would give you guys the next 10 minutes back in your day, maybe get some lunch, and look forward to seeing you May 27th. So yeah.